What's up, leaders? Hey, let's talk life. Let's talk moving forward. Let's talk influence. Let's talk about the calling that God has placed on your life to be a leader. In order to do that, I want to go back to the greatest leadership book that has ever been written. That's the Bible. Today, we're going to be in our fourth session talking about one really important word that leaders understand and embrace. We're going to 1 Kings chapter 19, the story of a great leader in the Old Testament by the name of Elisha. Elisha was a prophet of God, and in 1 Kings chapter 19, he kind of gets called up into the big leagues. He gets his first job as a leader, his first calling and responsibility as a leader. And in 1 Kings chapter 19, this is the story of Elijah and Elisha. Now, I get it. I didn't make up the names. I didn't put them together in the story. I know it's confusing, okay? So just bear with me here. But this story is about a young leader that gets an opportunity. And one word in particular that this young leader learned early on that was going to be important for his leadership. And it's a word that I want you and I to look at today. Here we go. Write it. It's the F word. Write it in big letters at the top of your page. Focus. Leaders know how to focus. If you can't focus, you are going to miss out on what God has called you to do. You're going to not be effective as a leader. And so I want to talk about leadership and focus today from this incredible leader by the name of Elisha. So let me give you the backstory. God had called Elisha to be a prophet. And he was going to be the next generation of prophets that was going to take over for this current prophet, this mouthpiece of God. The older man's name was Elijah. And so God spoke with Elijah and said, hey, I've got the next generation of prophet. I want you to come and anoint him, come mentor him, call him into this new calling of leadership and to be a mouthpiece for God. So Elijah said, let's do it. Let's do this together. So in 1 Kings chapter 19, starting in verse 19, we see this young man, Elisha, being called into leadership. Here's what verse 19 says. So Elijah, the older man, went and found Elisha, the younger guy, son of Shaphat, plowing a field. There's this young guy, man, just working on his family farm, plowing a field. There were 12 teams of oxen in the field, and Elisha was plowing with the 12th team. Now, Elisha was just an ordinary guy, just a regular guy living on his family farm, doing a regular job, taking care of cows, farming the land. He was just working hard. And that's where God found him. See, here's something interesting about Elisha. He didn't have a huge opportunity. He didn't have some big stage. He wasn't already leading thousands of people. You know what Elisha was doing? He was simply being faithful where God had put him. He was working hard. He was tending the land. He was helping his family business, serving his family and parents. That's oftentimes what God does. You may not have a big platform now. You may not have thousands of people following you. You may not have some super fancy title. But trust me, where you are right now is a part of the leadership process. It's a part of you walking into the calling that God has for your life. God is looking for men and women like you that are simply being faithful with what they have. Being faithful with the plow and the family farm and the 12 oxen, the simple calling that God has on your life right now. Watch how if you're faithful with the small things in your life, God will continue to open up more and more doors and will continue to give more influence as a leader. So it's a pretty terrible job, if we're being honest. Every single day, Elisha was behind, Scripture says, behind 12 oxen. Now, you know what your view is every day when you're walking behind oxen, right? You know what the smell is every day when you're walking behind 12 cows, right? Pretty bad. Not a great job. I've had some bad summer jobs when I first started working. I've had some tough jobs, but never a job that stunk that bad and had that bad of a view. But you know what? Elisha was being faithful. He was being obedient with the opportunity that God had for him. Here's the second part of 19. Elijah, the older man, went over to him and threw his cloak around his shoulders and then walked away. What in the world does that mean, right? Just some guy comes up to you in the middle of your work and just like throws a cape over your shoulders like a cloak. What does that mean? Here's what that meant. Extremely significant. This was God's way of giving Elisha a calling into leadership. This cloak that the prophet wore symbolized this calling that God had placed on his life. It's kind of like this. If you got a job with a new company and they gave you a shirt with the logo on it, right? That shirt symbolizes you're on the team. You work with this company now. Maybe you're a first responder. You're a fire officer or EMS. People like that have uniforms. Police officers, people that drive an ambulance, they have badges and name tags and all that stuff. Well, that symbolizes that you're a part of the team. When you put that on, you're a part of the team. Maybe you're a nurse or a doctor, and when you put that white coat on, that symbolizes something. Or when you have the scrubs and your ID badge that gets you back into all the surgery rooms and all access to the entire hospital, that means something. When you put those things on, it symbolizes something. And so that was like it was with Elijah. When he put this cloak on, it symbolized a calling, a new purpose, and a new responsibility. See, God had a purpose for Elisha. He had a calling. He knew that he had called him to leadership. And here's something great that I want you to understand. God has a purpose for you. God has a calling for you. God has a calling on your life for you into ministry and into leadership. So that's where I want to ask you the first set of questions. Take a minute. You can hit pause right here. Take a look at the questions and unpack it with your group, or take some notes in your journal as we take this journey together. The first question is this. What is the purpose of your life? Do you know that? Do you know why you're here on earth? See, Elisha knew what that robe meant. He knew what that cloak meant, that it gave him a new purpose and a new calling, and he was clear on that. But do you know that not only does God have a purpose and a calling for your life, but do you know what it is? Take a minute and just jot that down. If someone asked you what your purpose and calling was, why are you here? What would you say? Second question is this. What are the top 2 or 3 things that God has called you to? I'm talking about your top priorities, the ones that matter the most. I know that a lot of you wear a lot of different hats, have a lot of different responsibilities, but if you could give me your top 2 or 3, what would they be? Write those things down, the things that matter the most, your top priorities in life. Third question is this. Oftentimes, God looks for people that are being faithful in their current situation before he opens up a door to something greater, before he increases your influence, gives you a bigger platform, or gives you a title in your leadership and a certain responsibility. So let me ask you this. What does it look like to be faithful in those 2 to 3 categories that you listed in question number 2? If your top priorities are family and marriage and your job, your relationship with God, I don't know what you put in those top 3 categories, but take a minute and just define for each line, what does it mean to be faithful as a spouse, as a mother or a father, as a boss, as a coworker, as a follower of Jesus, as a small group leader? What does it look like to be faithful? Take a minute and define those things. Those are foundational for leadership. What are you called to do? What is your purpose in life? And how are you going to accomplish that and be faithful in every area? Now that we got the groundwork for your purpose and you know why you are here, let me keep reading in the text. Verse 20, Elisha left the oxen standing there, ran after Elijah and said to him, "First, let me go and kiss my father and mother goodbye, and then I will go with you." And Elijah, the old guy, replied to him, "Go back, but think about what I have done for you." Elisha, the young guy, just says, look, wait, he knows what just happened. This mantle was placed on him. He has accepted it. He's running towards the responsibility that God has called him to in his life. And he says, Elisha, let me just go tell my mom and dad goodbye. Let me kiss them, tell them where I'm going. I don't want to just disappear. Missing person alert, right? I don't want that. So let me just go back and tell them and kiss them goodbye and tell them where, and then I will follow you. Then I will come with you. And Elijah's like, okay. You want to know something interesting? It's the second thing that really stands out to me in this story. Not only did Elisha know his purpose and his calling, but the second thing that Elisha realized was this. You don't have to have all of the details to obey immediately. Do you know that? If God has called you to leadership, I know that we love to have steps 2 through 10 laid out and clear before we take step 1. But did you know that's not oftentimes how God works? See, God will test our faithfulness. God will test whether or not we are passionate about the calling and the purpose that we have on our lives as leaders. God will test that oftentimes by giving us a small step, but not providing any of the other details. He just says, let me see if you'll be faithful with a little bit. Let me see if you will follow me, even if you have questions, even if you're not sure what's next. See, focusing on Jesus and following him doesn't mean that you see everything about the future. It simply means that you are willing to follow him, even if he just tells you what the first step is. Even if he just tells you one thing. Even if you still have answers, or if you still have questions that don't have answers yet. God will test you in that. See, leaders aren't the ones that know everything. Leaders are simply the ones that are willing to act on what they do know. And Elisha was willing to immediately obey, even though he didn't know where he was going. Elisha did not know how long he was going to be gone. He didn't know what he was going to be doing. He didn't know how much it was going to cost. He didn't have any of the answers. But yet, he still moved forward in obedience. Here's a second set of questions. Let's answer these before we move on. Answer them with your group in your journal. Hit the pause button in a moment. You'll see the questions on the screen. The first one is this. Take a minute and write down what you do know. Now, I realize in your life and in your calling and your purpose in leadership, there are some unanswered questions. There's some things that you don't know, but there are some things that you do know. What is your calling? What are the gifts that God has given you? I mean, you're not bragging on yourself. You're just being honest. Like, these are the things that God has given you, the talents that God has equipped you with. What are those? What are the opportunities that God has already placed in front of you right now? These are the open doors. I'm not asking you what you hope will happen one day. What are the doors that are open right now? How can you be faithful with those? The second question is this. Oh man, this one stings. What excuses are you making that are hindering you from moving forward and using those things for God's glory? There are some of you that you know that you've been called into leadership. You know that God has a purpose in your life, but sometimes we like to give excuses to ourselves and to God as to why we can't move forward. Well, God, I don't know all the answers. Well, there's so many unanswered questions. Well, God, before this happens, I just want to see if this happens and this and that and that. And once all those things happen, then I can be faithful. Then I can move forward. Let me ask you, what else are you waiting on God to do before you can say yes? There are some things that you know, and there are some excuses that you are making. Write both of those things down. Take a minute and let's learn from those things that may be keeping you from moving forward into being the man or the woman that God has called you to be. Here's the last part of the verse, my favorite part of the verse. I love this story. Verse 21, so Elisha returned to his oxen and slaughtered them. He used the wood from the plow to build a fire to roast their flesh. He passed around the meat to the townspeople, steaks and hamburgers for everyone, and they all ate. Then he went with Elisha as his assistant. Third thing I realize about this young leader is where we hone in on this idea of focus. In order to really focus on God, you've got to stop focusing on other things. Sometimes what keeps our focus off of what God has called us to are the distractions that are around us. I've heard this before. The secret to focus is elimination, right? One thing that will keep you distracted and that oftentimes distracts me from being the man or the woman that God has called me to be are the distractions in life. I lose focus on plan A because I'm busy looking at plan B or plan C. I'm distracted by the things that are around me, and that causes me to lose focus on what God's called me to do. See, Elijah knew that God had called him into the ministry. Elisha knew that there was a calling of leadership, but Elisha also realized this. There are some things that I have in my life currently that are serving as a distraction to what God has called me to. And he identified those things. As long as there are things in your life that will cause you to lose your focus, then you'll never be as effective at what God has called you to be. Elisha knew there was something in his life that would always distract him. There would be something in his life that he could always look back to. Something that he could focus on, something that he could fall back on. You know what it was? It was the cows and the plows. The cows and the plows stood for his identity before God had called him into leadership. It stood for his family status. Those cows and plows meant financial security for him. As long as all those things were in his past, then it was going to distract him from becoming the leader that God had called him to. Because can I just be honest with you? Leadership is hard. And there are some times where we will get distracted and lose our focus and we'll want to quit. If there's money or opportunities or distractions in our past that we can fall back on, then we will always go back to them. There are distractions in your life and in my life that are preventing me from being the leader that God has called me to, from being the man or the woman that God has created us to be. And one of the things that may be keeping you from focusing on being the leader that God has called you to be is the many things in your life that are serving as distractions. For Elisha, it was time to kill the cows and burn the plows. The two things that would distract him, that would cause him to lose sight of what God had called him to be. He said, I have to eliminate those things. It was keeping him from focusing. So it's time to burn the plow. Whatever it is in your life, relationships, a sin that you may have, the love of something else, excuses, I don't know what it is, but there are things that will distract us. And the beautiful thing that Elisha did here is he eliminated those distractions because he saw it as something that would hinder him from becoming the man that God had called him to be. Here was the most difficult part about this. You ready? Sometimes distractions aren't necessarily bad things. You know, if you've got addictions to things or drugs and alcohol, you can look at that and be like, yeah, I've noticed that that's a bad distraction. I probably need to eliminate that. But did you know that there are things in your life that are actually good things? That there's nothing innately wrong with them, but they're still serving as distractions in your life. And the only way you're going to be able to walk confidently and boldly into your future is if you learn how to eliminate the distractions, kill the cows, and burn the plows. Listen, even a good thing can become a bad thing when it holds you back from the best thing. That's how Elisha saw the cows and the plows. He says, man, these are good things, but they're going to turn into bad things because I know one day they'll distract me from the best things. Ministry would get hard, and Elisha, in the back of his mind, could say, well, I've always got the plows. I could always go home to the cows. I could always go home and have an easy job and make good money. And as long as that was in the back of his mind, he knew it would serve as a distraction moving forward. It's time to kill the cows and burn the plows. It's what great leaders do. We focus by eliminating distractions around us. Here's the third set of questions. What is it that is stealing away your focus from God? What are those things in your life? And think really hard because they're not always bad things. There might be some good things that are actually keeping you away from the best things that God has for you. When you eliminate and when you identify those things, it's time to eliminate them. Burn the plows. Question number 2, what is the thing that is getting in the way of you growing in your relationship with God? Again, maybe it seems harmless until you realize that it's stealing from your growth, that it's distracting you from becoming the man or the woman that God has called you to be. If you can figure out what is distracting you, it's time to kill the cows. Kill the cows and burn the plows. Third question, what step do you need to take right now? Now, I'm not talking about later. I'm not talking about in the next season of life. What step do you need to take right now so that you can be ready to focus on the incredible calling that God has placed on your life? Don't put it off. Don't delay it. Even before Elisha left, he said, before we do anything else, there's things that I need to eliminate. It's time to kill the cows and burn the plows. Here's the last part. You ready? This is something that I try to do in my life to help me with this idea of focus and eliminating the distractions around me. It's an exercise that's been really helpful for me. You've probably heard of people that have a to-do list, right? Maybe that's you. Maybe every week, every Saturday night or Sunday night, you say, let me lay out the week and I'm gonna do a priority list. I'm gonna do a to-do list. It helps people stay on track, keeps people from being distracted. But I do something different that I want to challenge you to try that helps me a lot more than a to-do list. I call it a to-don't list. What if instead of listing the things that you have to do, what if you formulated a list of things that you're going to stop doing in order to be more effective? These are things that you're going to eliminate. My to-don't list is full of distractions in my life that are keeping me from walking into the calling that God has for me. Again, maybe they're not bad. They're just distractions. Here are a few that could be an example. I say no social media in the morning and in the evening. The morning and the evening, I want to be focused on other things, focused on my time with God, focused on the family, focused on the time that I get to spend with my wife. If I want to check the social media and Instagram over my lunch break, then so be it. But I'm not going to start my day pulling up my phone or end my day cruising my phone. That's a to-don't. Don't get on social media in the morning and in the evening. Maybe you have some physical goals. A goal may be no junk food. You know, I want to eat healthy because when I eat healthy, I can focus better. My body, when it's physically up to speed, it helps me think better. I'm faster. I'm quicker. I feel better when I do things. So no junk food. No eating out at McDonald's like 5 times a week. No fast food multiple times during the week. So that's a to-don't. Maybe it's this. Maybe your to-don't is I am not going to hit the snooze button in the morning. When the alarm goes off, I'm going to get up. I'm going to take that extra 10, 15, 20, 30, 45 minutes, some of you that are snoozing, and I'm going to get up and take a shower and be productive. I'm going to spend time in the Word. I'm going to spend time praying instead of snoozing. I'm going to regain that time. How are you going to do that? You're going to have a to-don't list. Do not hit the snooze button. No procrastinating. Maybe you can make a commitment that I'm going to stop pushing things off. I'm going to stop waiting until the last minute to do things, and I'm going to get off and get on the right foot by doing things early and spending the time so that it can be quality. What if you had a to-don't list? Just take a few minutes and formulate a to-don't list. The things that you are not going to do this week, the things that you know are going to distract you from what God has called you to do. Distractions are things that cause us to lose our focus. So don't do it. Eliminate those things. Great leaders aren't the ones that know how to say yes to the most amount of things. Great leaders are the ones that actually know how to say no to the most amount of things. Saying no, eliminating distractions helps you to focus. Now, these great leaders aren't the ones that are averaging like 5 or 6 things in their life that they're good at. Great leaders are the ones that are great at 1 or 2 things. If you'll focus and focus on eliminating distractions, then you can be that type of leader that is great at the 1 or 2 top priorities that God has called you to do and to be. And you'll become more effective as a leader. Let's focus on focus.